The quickest way to lose the truth is to believe you already know it. Officer Daniel Harper slammed the door of his patrol car and pointed toward the bright red Ferrari sitting just outside the luxury showroom. "Step away from the vehicle," he ordered. Now, the handful of customers leaving the dealership stopped in their tracks as every conversation faded beneath the sharp echo of his command. Standing beside the driver's door, Marcus Cole slowly lowered the leather folder he had been carrying and turned toward the officer with a calm expression that revealed neither fear nor frustration. The afternoon sun reflected across the flawless crimson paint, making the sports car glow against the polished glass walls of the dealership. Only seconds earlier, Marcus had accepted the keys after months of waiting for the custom-built vehicle to arrive. Now the celebration had disappeared beneath the rising tension of flashing blue lights. Harper accelerated his patrol car forward to block the dealership exit, but he misjudged the distance by only a few inches. A harsh scraping sound cut through the parking lot as the front corner of the patrol vehicle struck the Ferrari, damaging the front bumper and fender before both vehicles came to a complete stop. Gasps spread through the crowd. The dealership employees stared in disbelief, while several customers instinctively reached for their phones. Harper climbed out without looking at the damage. His attention remained fixed on Marcus. "A car like this does not belong to someone like you," he said confidently. "You are going to explain exactly where you got it." Marcus briefly glanced at the damaged Ferrari before returning his eyes to the officer. His voice remained quiet and perfectly controlled. "Officer, is every camera here recording?" Harper frowned at the unexpected question. "You should be worried about yourself." Marcus nodded once. "I am concerned about everyone involved." Ethan Brooks, the dealership owner, hurried outside holding a folder of purchase document, barely acknowledged him. "Stay back. I will decide what is legitimate." Ethan stopped walking but held the paperwork tightly against his chest. Marcus made no attempt to argue. He simply stood beside the damaged Ferrari while warm afternoon light reflected across the cracked paintwork and polished chrome wheels. The silence around him felt heavier than the expensive automobile itself. Harper circled the vehicle, studying Marcus instead of the registration sticker still attached to the windshield. Several dealership security cameras overlooked the entire parking lot, their lenses quietly recording every movement without interruption. Sarah Kim, a civil attorney waiting to collect her own vehicle, watched the encounter unfold from the showroom entrance with growing concern. She had seen the patrol car strike the Ferrari before the officer ever stepped outside. Marcus calmly rested one hand on the leather folder beneath his arm, careful not to reveal the official documents inside. He knew one sentence could immediately change the entire encounter, but he chose not to speak it. Instead, he watched Harper continue building conclusions before gathering facts. Somewhere inside the showroom, Marcus's cell phone began vibrating repeatedly with incoming calls that went unanswered, while beyond the dealership windows, no one yet realized that the quiet man standing beside the damaged Ferrari was on his way to a meeting connected to an FBI investigation that would soon make every decision in that parking lot impossible to ignore. 1 hour before the damaged Ferrari became the center of everyone's attention, Marcus Cole walked through the glass doors of the dealership with the same quiet confidence that had guided him through nearly 2 decades of federal service. He wore a dark jacket over a simple button-down shirt, carried a weathered leather portfolio beneath one arm, and greeted every employee with genuine courtesy. Ethan Brooks met him near the showroom floor with a warm smile and the final purchase documents already prepared. The bright red Ferrari rested beneath carefully positioned lights, its polished finish reflecting across the spotless marble floor. Ethan congratulated Marcus on finally taking delivery after months of waiting for the custom specifications to be completed. Marcus smiled modestly and thanked every technician who had worked on the vehicle. He declined the dealership's offer to photograph him beside the car for their social media page because he still had another appointment that afternoon. Few people knew how long he had planned for this purchase. The Ferrari was not a symbol of sudden wealth. It represented years of disciplined saving, careful investing, and countless weekends sacrificed while pursuing difficult investigations that often demanded more patience than recognition. Marcus believed achievements spoke for themselves and never needed to be announced. Inside the leather portfolio rested documents far more valuable than the purchase contract for the automobile. Carefully organized beneath official folders were investigative reports connected to an ongoing FBI Public Corruption Unit operation examining fraudulent government vehicle contracts, falsified procurement records, and a network of public officials suspected of abusing their authority for financial gain. Marcus had arranged to meet a confidential source less than 40 minutes later at a nearby office building, where additional evidence was expected to strengthen an already significant federal case. Before leaving the showroom, Ethan carefully handed Marcus both key fobs, temporary registration papers, insurance confirmation, and copies of every purchase document. Marcus reviewed each page with the same attention to detail he brought to every investigation before placing them neatly inside his leather portfolio. As he reached the driver's door, Sarah Kim, a civil attorney waiting for maintenance on her own vehicle, smiled politely and congratulated him on the beautiful Ferrari. Marcus thanked her and replied that he hoped the drive home would be the least interesting part of his day. Neither of them realized how quickly those words would become untrue. The engine started with a smooth, controlled sound as Marcus slowly guided the Ferrari toward the dealership exit. At almost the exact same moment, a patrol vehicle turned into the entrance after receiving a report about a suspicious luxury sports car. Marcus noticed the flashing lights approaching in his mirrors, but remained completely calm. He shifted the Ferrari into park before reaching the street, placed both hands where they could easily be seen, and quietly waited, unaware that the next few minutes would transform an ordinary vehicle delivery into evidence for an entirely different investigation. Officer Daniel Harper had spent more than 20 years wearing a badge, and somewhere along the way he had begun trusting his instincts more than the evidence in front of him. Fellow officers often described him as decisive, while supervisors appreciated how quickly he responded to calls. Yet there was another reputation that rarely appeared in official evaluations. Harper frequently reached conclusions before asking questions, believing that experience alone allowed him to recognize deception within seconds. Earlier that afternoon, Dispatch had received a report from an anonymous caller claiming that an unfamiliar red Ferrari matching the description of a recently circulated fraud alert had been spotted leaving a luxury dealership. The information was incomplete and had never been verified against the vehicle identification number, registration records, or dealership inventory. Instead of requesting additional confirmation, Harper immediately drove toward the location convinced he was about to recover an illegally obtained luxury vehicle. As he approached the dealership entrance, he noticed Marcus Cole standing beside the bright red Ferrari with a leather portfolio tucked beneath one arm. Marcus remained calm, waiting for a break in traffic before entering the roadway. Harper barely glanced at the temporary registration displayed inside the windshield. He never spoke with the dealership staff before acting. The polished sports car, the quiet black man beside it, and the anonymous report combined inside Harper's mind until assumption became certainty. Ethan Brooks stepped toward the entrance carrying another copy of the purchase agreement, hoping to explain that everything had already been verified through financing, insurance, and registration. Harper raised one hand before Ethan could finish speaking. "Sir, stay where you are." Sarah Kim watched from only a few yards away, surprised that no one had asked even the most basic questions about ownership. Marcus remained respectful from the very beginning. "Officer," he said evenly, "if there is a concern, the dealership can verify the purchase in less than a minute." Harper shook his head. People trying to hide something usually want to control the conversation. Marcus answered with the same measured tone. "Verification protects everyone involved." Those words received no response. Harper continued circling the Ferrari, studying Marcus far more closely than the vehicle itself. The sunlight reflected across the flawless red paint, while dealership security cameras silently recorded every angle of the parking lot. Marcus noticed each camera without drawing attention to them. He had spent enough years conducting federal investigations to understand that facts preserved in real time were often stronger than memories repeated later. He quietly rested one hand against the leather portfolio containing confidential investigative files and resisted the temptation to identify himself. One sentence could have ended the encounter immediately, but Marcus wanted the officer's decisions to be measured by the same standard every ordinary citizen deserved. Across the parking lot, another incoming call reached Harper's patrol computer with updated information requesting confirmation through the dealership before taking further action, But the notification remained unread as Harper continued following the version of events he had already decided was true. Officer Daniel Harper stepped closer to the Ferrari with measured confidence, never noticing the updated dispatch message still waiting unread on the computer mounted inside his patrol car. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh asphalt and newly cut grass across the dealership parking lot, while the polished red Ferrari reflected the bright summer sky like a mirror. Marcus Cole remained beside the driver's door exactly where he had stopped moments earlier, his leather portfolio resting comfortably beneath one arm and both hands visible. "Officer," Marcus said respectfully, "the vehicle identification number is visible through the windshield. The registration paperwork is inside this portfolio. Ethan Brooks can also confirm the purchase immediately." Harper barely glanced toward the dealership owner before shaking his head. "I am not interested in rehearsed stories." Ethan took another careful step forward, still holding duplicate purchase documents. "Sir, I personally completed the sale. The financing has cleared, the insurance is active, and the registration has already been processed." Harper raised his hand again without allowing him to finish. "Stay where you are." Sarah Kim watched from the showroom entrance with growing concern. As a civil attorney, she immediately recognized that every simple opportunity to verify ownership was being ignored. Marcus remained remarkably composed. "Officer, you can confirm the vehicle identification number, contact the dealership, or check the electronic registration database. Those steps will answer every question within minutes." Harper looked directly at Marcus instead of the Ferrari. People trying to sound cooperative are sometimes the most practiced. Marcus quietly nodded. Verification protects both citizens and officers. The sentence hung in the warm afternoon air. Several employees had quietly gathered near the showroom windows, watching through the glass without speaking. Every security camera mounted along the building continued recording the encounter from multiple angles. Harper suddenly decided to reposition his patrol vehicle closer to the Ferrari to prevent what he believed might become an attempted escape. He climbed back into the cruiser, shifted into drive, and slowly turned the front bumper toward the dealership exit. Marcus took one careful step backward, giving the patrol vehicle additional room. Ethan instinctively raised one hand, as if to signal the officer to stop. The distance looked safe at first, but Harper turned slightly too sharply. A harsh scraping sound echoed across the parking lot as the front corner of the patrol vehicle struck the Ferrari's front fender and bumper, pushing the sports car several inches before both vehicles came to a complete stop. Silence instantly replaced every conversation in the dealership. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment. Sarah covered her mouth in disbelief. Marcus slowly looked toward the fresh damage spreading across the flawless red paint before returning his attention to Harper. His expression never changed. "Officer," he said quietly, "please make certain every dashboard camera, every body camera, every security camera, and every witness statement from this scene is preserved exactly as it exists today." Harper stepped out of the patrol vehicle and glanced briefly at the damaged Ferrari, but instead of acknowledging what had happened, he squared his shoulders and said, "Nobody leaves until I finish this investigation." Marcus gave one small nod. "Neither the facts nor I are going anywhere." At that exact moment, Marcus's cell phone vibrated again inside his jacket, displaying another incoming call from a contact whose name remained hidden from everyone except him, while somewhere beyond the dealership parking lot, events already set in motion were rapidly moving toward the scene. The sound of metal scraping against polished steel lingered in the warm afternoon air long after both vehicles had stopped moving. Tiny fragments of red paint rested on the pavement beneath the Ferrari's damaged front bumper, while sunlight reflected unevenly across the fresh scrape stretching along the fender. Marcus Cole looked at the damage for only a moment before shifting his attention back to Officer Daniel Harper. There was no anger in his expression, only quiet disappointment. Ethan Brooks slowly walked around the front of the Ferrari, carefully inspecting the impact before looking toward Harper. "Officer," he said respectfully, "this vehicle was stationary when your patrol car made contact." Harper dismissed the observation with a brief wave of his hand. "I will determine what happened." Sarah Kim stood several feet away with her phone lowered at her side. She had recorded only after the collision occurred, but she knew the dealership security cameras had captured everything from the moment the patrol vehicle entered the parking lot. Marcus remained composed. "Officer, I respectfully ask that every recording from every available camera be preserved immediately." Harper folded his arms. "You seem unusually concerned about evidence." Marcus answered without hesitation. "Evidence protects honest people." Ethan opened the dealership entrance and pointed toward the ceiling. "Our exterior cameras continuously record multiple angles of the parking lot. They also capture audio near the entrance." Harper looked briefly toward the cameras before returning his attention to Marcus. "Nobody is reviewing anything until I finish here." Marcus slowly nodded. "Then I would also ask that the vehicle identification number, the electronic registration, and the purchase documents be verified before any further conclusions are reached." Harper ignored the request. Instead, he reached toward the leather portfolio tucked beneath Marcus's arm. "What is inside?" Marcus held the portfolio securely without resisting. "Purchase documents, insurance records, and confidential business files unrelated to this vehicle." Harper narrowed his eyes. "Open it." Marcus remained courteous. "Some of those documents are protected. I would appreciate the opportunity to separate the purchase paperwork from the remaining files." Harper interpreted the careful response as another attempt to delay the investigation. "You do not decide how this works." Around them, the dealership had grown unusually quiet. Employees stood behind the showroom glass, while several customers remained near the entrance, watching without speaking. Marcus noticed every reflection in the dealership windows, every security camera mounted beneath the roofline, and every witness who had quietly stayed instead of leaving. Years of federal investigative work had taught him that truth often survived because ordinary people chose not to walk away. His phone vibrated once again inside his jacket pocket, followed almost immediately by a second vibration only seconds later. Harper noticed the repeated calls but made no effort to ask who was trying to reach Marcus. Instead, he focused on opening the portfolio, convinced it contained proof supporting the assumptions he had already made. Marcus looked toward the damaged Ferrari one final time before quietly saying, "Officer, sometimes the most important evidence is created after the first mistake." Harper paused for only an instant before reaching for the portfolio again, completely unaware that the unanswered calls arriving one after another were coming from the very people who would soon transform this ordinary parking lot into the center of an entirely different investigation. The afternoon sun slowly drifted behind a passing layer of clouds, softening the bright reflections across the Ferrari's damaged hood until the brilliant red paint appeared almost muted beneath the changing light. A gentle breeze carried loose leaves across the dealership parking lot while the crowd that had gathered only minutes earlier stood unusually still, as though everyone sensed the moment had become about far more than a damaged automobile. Marcus Cole remained beside the driver's door with quiet patience, the leather portfolio still resting beneath one arm. He neither raised his voice nor argued. Instead, he watched Officer Daniel Harper continue studying him rather than the evidence surrounding them. Marcus had learned long ago that silence often revealed more about another person than endless conversation ever could. His father, who had spent 3 decades teaching history at a public high school, often reminded him that dignity was easiest to keep when someone else was trying to take it away. Those words returned with remarkable clarity as Marcus looked across the polished dealership windows, reflecting both the patrol car and the Ferrari standing side by side. Harper remained convinced he was preventing a crime. He never noticed that every simple opportunity to verify the truth had quietly passed him by. Ethan Brooks stood just outside the showroom entrance holding the purchase documents that still had not been examined. Sarah Kim remained nearby, patiently observing every decision while mentally noting each unanswered request for verification. Above them, security cameras continued recording from multiple angles without interruption, preserving every movement, every statement, and every passing minute. Marcus slowly looked down at the fresh scrape running across the Ferrari before gently brushing a small fragment of red paint from the front fender with his fingertips. There was disappointment in his eyes, but no bitterness. He understood that expensive property could be repaired. Trust and fair treatment was often much harder to restore. His cell phone vibrated again inside his jacket pocket, followed by another vibration only moments later. Harper glanced toward the sound, but never asked who was calling. The unanswered calls continued arriving from people who expected Marcus to be seated in an important federal briefing rather than standing quietly beside a damaged sports car. For a brief moment, Marcus considered revealing his identity and ending the encounter immediately. Instead, he allowed the thought to pass. If respect depended upon a title, then the lesson would disappear the next time an ordinary citizen stood in the same position. He quietly lifted his eyes toward the dealership cameras and then back toward Harper. "Officer," he said softly, "facts do not become less important simply because someone believes they already know the answer." Harper offered no reply. The parking lot remained silent except for the distant sound of traffic moving beyond the dealership entrance. Then, without warning, the radio mounted on Harper's shoulder crackled to life with an urgent transmission requesting his immediate acknowledgement, while at nearly the same moment, two dark government sport utility vehicles turned onto the boulevard several blocks away, steadily making their way toward the dealership without anyone present yet realizing why they had come. The sharp crackle of Officer Daniel Harper's shoulder radio broke the silence that had settled over the dealership parking lot. "Unit 12, acknowledge immediately," the dispatcher said with unusual urgency. Harper pressed the transmit button without taking his eyes off Marcus Cole. "Unit 12. I have one suspicious individual detained during a vehicle investigation. The situation is under control." Several seconds passed before the dispatcher answered again. "Officer Harper, remain at your current location. Captain William Reynolds is requesting an immediate status update. Do not clear the scene." Harper frowned slightly. "Understood." He lowered his hand from the radio and turned back toward Marcus, convinced that headquarters was simply following routine procedure. Marcus remained exactly where he had been standing from the beginning, calm beside the damaged Ferrari with his leather portfolio still tucked beneath one arm. Ethan Brooks quietly watched from the showroom entrance while Sarah Kim continued observing every detail without speaking. Moments later, the low sound of powerful engines rolled into the parking lot. Two dark government sport utility vehicles entered through the dealership gates and stopped several yards away. Their doors opened almost simultaneously. Three professionally dressed men and one woman stepped out, each wearing discreet credentials clipped beneath tailored jackets. The woman walked confidently toward Marcus without hesitation. "Special Agent Cole," she said, "we have been trying to reach you for nearly 20 minutes. Marcus offered a polite nod. "I know. My phone has been occupied." Officer Harper looked from Marcus to the newcomers with visible confusion. "Who exactly are you?" The woman calmly presented her credentials. "Supervisory Special Agent Olivia Grant, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The parking lot fell completely silent. Harper stared at the identification before slowly looking back at Marcus. Olivia continued, "Special Agent Cole was scheduled to brief our Joint Corruption Task Force this afternoon. When he stopped answering his phone, we traced his last confirmed location here." Harper's expression changed for the first time since arriving. "He is an FBI agent?" Olivia answered evenly. "He has been for many years." Marcus finally shifted the leather portfolio from beneath his arm and carefully opened it just enough to reveal neatly organized federal case files bearing official FBI markings, investigative reports, and evidence logs connected to an ongoing public corruption investigation. He closed the portfolio again almost immediately. Those documents were never relevant to the ownership of the Ferrari, Marcus said quietly. "That is why I asked for the purchase paperwork to be verified first." Ethan stepped forward holding the dealership records. "Officer, I tried to explain exactly that." Sarah slowly lowered her phone, knowing every important moment had already been captured by the dealership cameras. Harper glanced toward the damaged Ferrari, then toward his patrol vehicle, and finally toward the untouched purchase documents still resting in Ethan's hands. Before anyone could speak again, Captain William Reynolds arrived in another patrol vehicle. He stepped out, quickly assessed the scene, and quietly listened as Olivia summarized what had happened. The captain's face grew noticeably more serious with every sentence. Marcus remained composed throughout the exchange. He neither celebrated the revelation nor criticized the officer standing before him. He simply looked toward the damaged Ferrari and said in the same calm voice he had used from the beginning, "Captain, my only request is that every recording, every witness statement, and every fact from today be preserved exactly as they occurred, because the truth deserves the same protection as the law itself." Captain William Reynolds remained silent for several moments after listening to the explanation from Supervisory Special Agent Olivia Grant. The afternoon breeze moved gently across the dealership parking lot, carrying with it the quiet sounds of traffic beyond the entrance, while everyone present waited for his response. Reynolds looked first at the damaged Ferrari, then at the dealership security cameras mounted along the building, and finally at Officer Daniel Harper. "Officer," he said calmly, "effective immediately, you are relieved of field duty pending an administrative investigation. Please surrender your patrol vehicle keys and department credentials to the responding supervisor when he arrives." Harper stood motionless, his earlier confidence replaced by visible uncertainty. "Captain, I believed I was acting on reliable information." Reynolds nodded slightly. "Believing something does not remove the responsibility to verify it." The words settled over the parking lot with quiet weight. Marcus Cole remained composed beside the Ferrari, showing no satisfaction at what had just happened. Olivia Grant stepped closer and spoke softly. "Marcus, we can continue the briefing another day. Headquarters is already preserving the investigation schedule." Marcus offered a grateful nod before turning toward Captain Reynolds. "Captain, I appreciate your professionalism, but I would like to make one request." Reynolds immediately gave him his full attention. "Go ahead." Marcus looked toward Ethan Brooks, Sarah Kim, and the small group of witnesses who had remained since the beginning. "Please preserve every dashboard camera recording, every body camera recording, every dealership security recording, every dispatch transmission, and every witness statement exactly as they exist today. The process matters more than my position." Reynolds answered without hesitation. "That has already been ordered." Ethan carefully handed the complete purchase file to the captain, who reviewed the registration, insurance confirmation, financing approval, and vehicle identification documents. Every page confirmed exactly what Marcus had said from the first minute of the encounter. Sarah quietly informed the captain that she had witnessed the patrol vehicle make contact with the Ferrari before any conversation about ownership had been completed. Reynolds thanked her and asked that her statement be included with the official report. Harper lowered his eyes toward the damaged front bumper of the Ferrari, seeing the fresh scrape differently now than he had only minutes earlier. For the first time, he recognized that the greatest damage created that afternoon could not be measured by repair estimates alone. Marcus gently rested one hand against the leather portfolio containing the federal investigation files before speaking again. "Captain, I do not want special treatment because I work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Every citizen deserves the same careful verification before conclusions are reached." Reynolds nodded with quiet respect. "You have my word that this review will follow the evidence wherever it leads." As another patrol supervisor arrived to collect Harper's equipment, the late afternoon sunlight slowly emerged from behind the clouds once again, reflecting across the Ferrari's damaged paint while the dealership cameras continued recording the final moments of a scene that had quietly become an unmistakable lesson about patience, accountability, and the importance of allowing facts to speak before assumptions ever have the chance. 1 month later, the bright red Ferrari rolled quietly back into the same dealership beneath a clear blue summer sky. Every trace of damage had disappeared, leaving the polished bodywork reflecting the morning sunlight exactly as it had before the unexpected encounter changed everything. Marcus Cole stepped out carrying the same weathered leather portfolio beneath one arm and greeted Ethan Brooks with the familiar smile of an old friend rather than a customer returning for unfinished business. Ethan shook his hand warmly and admired the restored vehicle. "She looks brand new again," he said. Marcus looked across the flawless paint before answering softly. The car was the easiest part to repair. Inside the showroom, Sarah Kim happened to be meeting with another client. She recognized Marcus immediately and walked over with a smile. "I heard the review was completed," she said. Marcus nodded. The process followed the evidence. Ethan quietly placed a newspaper on the showroom desk. A small article inside reported that Officer Daniel Harper had officially been dismissed following the completion of an internal investigation supported by dashboard camera footage, body camera recordings, dealership security video, dispatch communications, and witness statements. The report explained that the findings centered on failures to follow verification procedures before reaching conclusions, improper handling of the encounter, and avoidable damage to private property. Marcus folded the newspaper without another comment. He had never wanted another person's career to become the focus of the story. What mattered to him was that future encounters would begin with facts instead of assumptions. Later that morning, Captain William Reynolds arrived at the dealership wearing civilian clothes. He carried a thin folder containing updated department policies requiring officers to complete basic ownership verification whenever practical before escalating similar situations, additional procedural training, and expanded supervisory review for incidents involving significant property damage. Reynolds handed the folder to Marcus. "Your patient's changed more than one investigation," he said quietly. Marcus looked through the pages before closing the folder. Policies matter because the next person standing beside a car like this may not have a federal badge waiting inside a portfolio. Reynolds nodded in complete agreement. Neither man spoke for several moments. Outside, families walked along the sidewalk while traffic moved peacefully beneath the warm morning sun. Marcus slipped behind the steering wheel, started the Ferrari, and eased toward the exit with the calm confidence that had never left him. As he stopped at a traffic light only a few blocks away, another patrol vehicle pulled alongside for a brief moment before continuing through the intersection without hesitation, suspicion, or unnecessary attention. Marcus watched it disappear into the distance before driving forward beneath the open sky. The Ferrari's engine settled into a smooth, steady rhythm, and the polished red paint reflected the sunlight stretching across the highway ahead. In the quiet that followed, no title, badge, or expensive automobile mattered more than a simple truth that deserved to belong to every citizen alike. Respect should never depend on appearance, assumptions, or what someone drives. It should begin where justice always begins, with the willingness to see the person before the stereotype.